Welcome to the AXPONA Audio Insider Podcast. My name is Lenny Florentine, and today I'm here with Roland from Lyngdorf. What's up, man? How are you?
Hi, Lenny. I'm good. I'm here from Denmark, and all's good.
It's amazing that you can just talk to people from all across the world. Like, I've never been to Denmark. I don't know what's going on in Denmark. It's probably is it great over there? You like it?
You are now in Denmark on my screen. I see it.
I've been to, see, that's amazing. I am an international podcast host
Yeah,
now at this point. That's
no,
amazing.
it's
I
it's a
love
beautiful
it.
country. It's only 5 million people, so it's lots of nature, very calm, and it's a great place to be, and also a great place to yeah develop speakers. Actually, there are many speaker brands from Denmark, or drivers, driver manufacturers.
So how's the landscape over there? Is it like mountains? Is it like
I
small
wouldn't call it
towns, water? What are we
mountains.
talking?
It's very green. I would more
Okay.
call it hills than mountains, and
Okay.
as it's surrounded by water basically. So we have what we call the East Coast and the West Coast, as in the US, but in a very narrow stretch of the country.
In a very small, not like the US where it feels like you're never going to
No,
reach the other
no.
side.
You could go from the East Coast to the West Coast in what I would say 2 hours. That's no
Wow.
problem.
And have you lived there all your life?
No, I actually live in Hamburg, which is in Germany, just south of Denmark. But I work most of the time in Denmark, so Northern Europe both.
Okay, and I talk to people from Europe all the time, and it's so, you're like, you can get from one country to the other in absolutely no time. So there's a rich history of speakers in Denmark, and I know there's a rich history of hi-fi in Germany as well. I mean, there's a lot of great companies in out of both those countries. But like you yourself, you've lived out there all your life. How did you get into hi-fi?
Well, I studied marketing and business administration, but already with a plan to work in audio because I loved all these hi-fi brands and speakers and amplifiers so much, and music, of course. So I was really into hi-fi. I was also into electronics, but not enough to really study it or become an engineer. I was more on the product side of things and listening to it, and also the brands, all these different brands. So I offered my I offered my favorite audio brands to work as a trainee. And then my first job was at Marantz at a time when the wonderful Ken Ishiwata was becoming popular with the KI special products. And after that, many people know me from my 18 years at Dyne Audio, loudspeaker manufacturer from Denmark. Um, and that was the best time for me because that was when the company was still independent and the founder, Wilfried Ehrenholz, was on board, and the main engineer called Mark Torp. So that was a great time, and over 18 years. And today I work for Lyngdorf Audio, which is also in Denmark. And they also have a cooperation with Steinway and Sons, the finest piano manufacturer. So we have like an audio side, hi-fi audio side of things, and home cinema, and also this very different Steinway world.
Wow, that's it's crazy. Like you would never know that companies are coexisting, and there's a lot of them that people don't realize are like the same company or they're kind of, parent companies and whatnot. So there's a lot of that out there. But I gotta go back before we get in to Lyngdorf, and I'm a vintage audio guy, and I like a lot of vintage, hi-fi and stuff. And I wanted to ask you what your first system was, but I've gotten distracted. What years did you work at Marantz?
Oh, that was when I was still studying. So that was in the late 90s. Then first as a trainee, and then when I finished, I was also working with Marantz. So that was 2000, 2001, and then I was out.
Okay. Okay, I got you. So, what was your first hi-fi system? If we're talking the '90s, what was in that? You have a cassette
Yeah,
CD player.
yeah, for sure. CD players, that was happening a bit earlier, and my first hi-fi. I think most people will scratch their head when they hear the brand because it's unknown. But for me, it started it all, so it means a lot. It was a Japanese amplifier called Artec. It was slim as a book, but very heavy. And at that time, all of my friends had these micro systems on the shelf, where with the CD player on top, like these really tiny systems, and they all sounded like Mickey Mouse. And my amp sounded so good and so full. I didn't know why, because it was just something that my dad gave me for Christmas. So I had this amplifier instead of one system, and that product taught me that amplifiers can sound different and can sound better. And it came with two small speakers, and not really great speakers, but together with the amp it sounded good. But the thing was, then I soon found out that when I put some carpet on the inside walls, I mean inside the speaker, they sounded even better. So that product taught me that sound quality is not a given thing, but can be improved if you do something about it. So these two things, even though there are no names brand-wise, that was a very interesting time. And that
Now
was
I
the
got
fun
something to
part.
look up because I've never heard of that one. I thought I was going to be like,
No,
I'll know this. It's not a problem. I have no idea what brand that is. So
yeah,
now I got something to look up. The book looking
they're,
heavy amplifier from Artec.
they're not
See if I
around
can
anymore.
see if I can find it on the interwebs. See if I can find like a picture of it or something. So Lyngdorf had, what year did they start?
So Lyngdorf Audio was founded by Peter Lyngdorf in Denmark, and not so long ago, 2005. So
Okay. That's 20 years. You guys,
yeah, so
20
it's
years.
20 years, but most audio brands are longer, like from the 70s or even 60s. Or Bang& Olufsen from Denmark, they are over 100 years old. So we are relatively young, but yeah, as you say, it's 20 years. And even though Peter Lyngdorf started in retail, he set up a Scandinavian retail chain. He always thinks in products and in sound quality and in improving something. So with a team of very innovative engineers, he created actually the first digital amplifier in the world of audio. So that didn't come from a big known American, Japanese, German brand, but from Lyngdorf Audio. It was called the Tact Millennium. So that was really the first purely digital amplifier, years ahead of its time. Totally digital, no analog inputs, no analog outputs, only for the speakers, of course. And to cut the story a bit short, this core technology is still in our amplifiers today. So it's our own amplifier technology.
So you
And
guys you have speakers and you have amplifiers.
yeah, so it all started with amplifiers, digital amplifiers. Soon after, then we have another thing we are famous for. That's our own room calibration. We use it for two-channel stereo and also for home cinema, which is called Room Perfect. So you could say these are the two foundation stones: the digital amplifiers and Room Perfect calibration. And then speakers came later. So we are not really a speaker manufacturer where we are now. We produce our own cabinets, but we are mainly, our background is mainly electronics, from the digital and DSP side.
Well, that's exciting. I want to learn about the electronics, but I'm looking at what you have speaker wise right now. I just went to your site and I'm checking out the main picture. Do any of all of your speakers sit off the floor? Like it looks like a lot of them kind of go on the wall
It's a
or in
bit,
a cabinet. It's very unique.
yeah, it's a bit how it started. So our the speakers that we have for a long time in the portfolio are on-wall speakers. It's more like a 2.2 system. So it's a compact speaker for on-wall placement, but then together with two woofers, we call it boundary woofers because they are placed ideally in the room corners to have a kind of better acoustic coupling with the room, which is another special thing that we do. But yeah, it started with these we call it MH speakers. And they are for on-wall. And now, and that's the speaker we will also have AXPONA is a floor stand version, but also for wall placement. So we always try to have a certain edge, if that's the right word, when it comes to speakers. Mainly also because not only our Scandinavian, Danish background with lifestyle and making speakers that actually look good in a living room, but also our acoustic approach is sometimes different because let's face it, there are hundreds and more than enough speaker brands and speakers out there. So we try to find a different way, a acoustically and styling-wise.
So is a lot of what's in Europe and you said the Scandinavian style. Is it like a minimalistic style? Maybe the houses are a little smaller, so they don't want as much on the floor. Like I'm looking at the FR2s, which look like floor standers, but they're on the wall.
They can
It's
be
like
both. They can be both. So the
okay,
FR2 is a floor stand speaker, but it's always placed against the wall. We also have a wall mount for that, so you can hang it a little bit higher. But the main idea is or there are two ideas behind it. One is you could say it a lifestyle approach because we have many customers or dealers have who like to place the speaker closer to the wall. But you know how that is. Normally, when you move speakers against the wall, they sound very bass heavy, and that's what the wall does. So at one point, we thought, why don't we turn this thing around and make speakers that actually sound better when they're placed right against the wall? So first of all, it's easier to place them in the room. I mean, with the interior design. And secondly, acoustically, it's actually a good thing because if you tune the speakers so that they use the room acoustics and the wall behind it to its benefit, then you actually have a great speaker that sounds right at the wall and doesn't sound all boomy and bass heavy. So we kind of made the speaker for this wall placement. And actually the other thing, so that's in the frequency domain. So the speaker evens out, and the frequency domain evens out nicely when placed against the wall. And the other thing is, and that's why it's not only a lifestyle thing, is that the so-called impulse response, so that's the punch, the slam in the bass, is actually better when you place the speaker right against the wall. Or even better would be an in-wall speaker. So this is a floor stand speaker to be placed against the wall. And as you can see, the FR2 is very flat. It's less than or around 6 inch. And now you move the woofers very, very close to the wall. So when the bass waves radiate from the speaker, the reflection from the wall is actually very close to the speaker. And if you would move any speaker far away from the wall, you might even it out in the frequency domain, but this reflected bass wave from the wall is always delayed and creates a very uneven bass and some kind of phase effects. And the more you move it away, the more things even out in the frequency domain, but the more you delay the bass wave coming back. Actually, there's only one spot in the room where that is fine, the impulse response, the punch, and the timing, and that is if you move the speaker as close to the wall as possible. And that's what we did with the FR2.
and that's the one that you're going to have at AXPONA this year.
Exactly, yes.
I love how it just goes against. I think that's like, it's got such the the wife factor. I always call it, right? Because you got big speakers. I try to put stuff in my house all the time, and it's not always an approval thing. Maybe it's just temporary. But these, I mean, these are great, and the fact you could lift them off the ground is amazing. And I can't wait to kind of hear those and see how that works. It's just a different concept that a lot of other people really aren't doing.
Exactly.
And then tied in with you're going to have your electronics there too, right?
Yeah, the electronics, and then we also have these room perfect calibration that we have in our amplifiers. So then 1 + 1 is really more than 2 because you have a speaker that's made for wall placement to have better room acoustic coupling, and then we have the calibration.
So let's talk about the calibration before we
Yeah.
talk about the electronics. Let's jump into that because that sounds exciting. So how does that work?
So Room Perfect is a calibration which we have in our two-channel amplifiers and in our Dolby and DTS AV processors. Now in home cinemas, it's a typical thing to do, right? So in every home cinema, you calibrate the speakers to the room. Everyone knows that. But when it comes to music and two-channel amplifiers, people are not scared of calibrating, the sound. It's not a common thing to do, and that is also because many people or some people have a bad experience with linearizing the sound, putting a DSP in, and twisting the frequencies around. So not always that sounds better. And as you know, there are some audiophiles who also say, hey, don't touch the music signal. I don't want an equalizer and a DSP in the chain. I want to hear the pure music. The problem is that speakers and room, or speakers and room acoustics, is one thing. You can have an even better speaker, an even better speaker, a more expensive speaker. What stays is the room acoustics. And our engineers and also Peter Lyngdorf many years ago, they wanted to basically improve the sound of speakers in a room and came up with a calibration that works different than any other calibration. It's not linearizing the sound. It also takes a bit longer to measure it. Even though you don't need a computer or be a sound engineer or have to know anything about frequencies and which frequency does what, it's embedded in the amps. So you basically have a acoustic fingerprint of your room in the amplifier. And then the speakers are calibrated to the room acoustics.
So what's interesting is you talk about a lot of people do that with AV, and multi-channel. And for me, like I'm a 2-channel home theater guy, right? I just want my 2 speakers, and I want them to sound good with movies and with music. And I think do you think that's kind of a trending thing, like in general nowadays, is having 2-channel instead of a big multi-system?
Yeah, or both. Some have both. Some have a cinema in an separate room, and then they still want to have a good sound and good music in the living room next to the TV, maybe. They are kind of spoiled by the good sound in the theater, and then have these, tiny speakers left and right of the TV or even in the TV. And that doesn't give you a good sound experience. Yeah, that can be. Is that a trend? I hope so, because there are so
I
many.
hope it's a trend. I love it.
I mean, if you visit a studio, not only for music, but where movies are produced, and see how much work, how much effort they put into the sound design, into the sound of a movie or recorded music, and then you place it through 2 little Bluetooth speakers on the shelf, it's not really the right thing to do.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So you guys have an app, I'm guessing, that controls all this?
Yeah, so the amplifiers and also the processor are controlled with an app, where they also come with a remote control, and you can do many things on the front panel as well. But for example, the calibration is very easy to do in the app. You basically, so our amplifiers come with a microphone and a stand. And of course, you only have to do it once when you have the when you have a new amp. And then you calibrate it. It's a few buttons in the app. And again, you don't have to download a program or open your computer and work with frequencies. It's really very easy to do and to calibrate the speaker. And we did that so that people don't think like, oh, I have to be an expert, I have to be a sound engineer, and improve certain frequencies. It's basically done. It's embedded in the app.
There's some very difficult apps out there. I'm a very simple app guy. So when I hear that, it's done easily for people,
Yeah.
that's something that I kind of, that resonates with me because I don't. There's some of those apps can be very, 100 steps trying to get the room right, and by then I just want to hear the music. So.
Exactly. Because it's not a
And
cinema system. It's a 2-channel music system, and then you don't want to spend hours on calibrating it and opening, frequency diagrams and work with that. The other day I downloaded a manual for another calibration, which was for 2-channel stereo, and it was 56 pages. And I thought, okay, that must be multiple language. No, it was one language, and there was
56
yeah,
pages.
to listen to music, right? So and then
I don't think I've read a book that's 56 pages in the past 20 years. That may not be true. I do read, but still, that's a book.
No, I can promise you that Room Perfect takes less time, and there's no big manual. You're guided with the app. It's pretty easy to do, and you don't have to be a sound engineer to do this.
And I love the look of your. Let's talk about your amplifier for a second. So is this a Class D amp?
Yes, it's a Class D amp, but more precisely, it's a digital amplifier. So most Class D amps, despite the letter D, they are not digital amplifiers. It's just the letter D. They are switching or switch mode amplifiers. And we took it one step further. That's the technology I was talking about when Lyngdorf Audio started, and this Millennium amplifier, which is a digital amplifier. So we really take the incoming digital signal and use our own technology to amplify it. In our biggest amplifier, the TDI 500, it's amplified in the output stage, and the volume control is in the output stage. So we don't turn the signal into analog in the front end, but in the output stage. And that's something that other Class D amps don't do. Class D amps are still analog amplifiers. They still convert the incoming digital music signal, be it high-res downloads or streaming or MP3 or whatever. They turn it into analog inside the amp and then amplify it. And that's what we don't do. We keep the digital music in the digital domain as long as possible. So we don't have, all these things that listeners don't want from an amplifier, crosstalk, hiss, distortion, certain noise level. They mainly happen in the analog domain. So our thinking is to keep things, especially when people talk about studio master files and 24-bit and high sample rate, we talk about music in the digital domain, right? So we want to keep this in the digital domain as long as possible and only turn it into analog at the latest possible stage, right in front of the speaker outputs, amplifier outputs, where you connect the speakers, because eventually the signal has to be turned into analog so that it can drive a speaker. But until then, we keep it in its native digital domain.
It's so interesting. I am familiar with that technology, and I do really like that technology. Is it like, do you have like a MOSFET right at the end that turns it right before the speakers, or is that what it is?
Yeah, it is. It is a PCM to PWM conversion. It's really the right word. It's only Lyngdorf doing it. So people are excused. And what? How do you do that? Why is it a digital amp? Isn't that Class D? There are not many who do it this way, and that's quite
There's
fascinating.
not. I only know of one other brand that does it this way, and those. And I've heard those, and it always sounds very good. I love the idea of like most of the we do have turntables and I guess just turntables at this point of anything that anybody's buying new. Maybe some cassette decks out there, but most of what we're listening to is digital at this point, right? That's where we're going. I mean, people have vinyl because it's tangible and it's fun, and some people like the sound of that and whatnot, and vinyl is like a big thing. But most people in the world are listening to digital music in some form or another, whether it's streaming or maybe they have a CD transport that
Exactly.
is sending the signal, right, and it just goes direct. You don't need a DAC at that point. It goes right at the very end of the amp. So,
Exactly.
and I see you have an integrated amp, and then you also have a very slimline, nice looking CD player to go along with it to follow up with CD transport. I'm sure that is what it is.
It is both. It is
I
both.
just say CD player at this point, but it's a CD transport, and these look really nice. Like they have a screen on half of it, and they're nice and slimline, so it fits into that that modern look where it's not like taking up a ton of space. And being a digital amplifier, you can do that because you don't need as many big analog parts in there to be able to get the good sound. And I love the idea of the digital amplifier, and I didn't know that. I didn't know that yours was like that. And for me, most of what I do is streaming. I have a vinyl collection and a turntable and whatnot. But you know, you could still use that with this because you would just be using it would be an ADC, right? It would go into an
We,
ADC
we have,
along the digital converter.
we of course, our amplifiers have analog inputs. So we have analog inputs and a very good 24-bit AD converter right behind the input. So of course we have to convert an analog signal to digital because it's a digital amplifier and because we do these things in the digital domain like room perfect, and we also have a EQ tool that you don't have to use but you can use. So analog signals are turned in high res to digital. But I always say to people, don't be afraid of digital, because even, and I listen to analog myself, I have a record player at home, but don't be scared of digital, because even the best vinyl, if you visit studios, they produce in the digital domain. And then they turn it into analog and make a great analog and vinyl out of that. But except maybe Jack White in the US, there's a fully analog studio, but every studio do very high quality recordings, productions in the digital domain. So don't be scared of digital. That's how even the best sounding vinyl is produced nowadays, except the old ones which are converted from tape and then it's all analog. Fine. Nowadays, most analog music or analog vinyl is produced in studios digitally.
Yeah, and since we're mainly listening, like that's the trend, right? That's where we're going. I mean, we're already there. We're already at the everything's digital, and to be able to have an amp that does, it's kind of like it does one less conversion, and like you were saying, there's less things that can happen in an amplifier with that signal, to change the way that signal is. So just going straight digital right up to the last second, it's a great concept. I
Yeah.
love that. That is amazing. Very cool. Do you see, does, because that, since it's not very well known in the industry, like, is that something that, what are people's reactions to that?
Well, we normally we let them listen first and then explain it, so they don't think like, oh, digital amp. I like analog. I like Class D. I like tube amps and so on. So usually we talk about that, or we explain this technology after people listen to it, because it doesn't sound digital, or doesn't even sound Class D, because it isn't only Class D. It is more pure and more close to the original, which is a high res stream in high res or even low res. So very often people are surprised that what they are listening to is a fully digital amplifier, because many people think, oh, only analog amplifiers can give you this full and pure sound like a Class A and so on. But again, that contradicts a little bit the thinking of all these high res and studio master files. So people talk about high res and digital in the front end, but when it comes to amplifiers, suddenly it's all about analog, and that somehow doesn't really match.
So with all this digital music out there, you can just listen. You can listen to anything, whatever. Like I use Spotify because I can just listen to whatever. I'm trying, Cobuzz right now. Like I'm
Yeah.
trying different things, but I just, I have my playlist. What's on your playlist right now? What do you listen to?
Oh, I listen to so many different music, because I always also think in not only what I like to listen to, but also what could be great for next demo. So I'm not stuck to the same demo tracks all the time. So that can change a lot. I'm a bit
So is there certain demo tracks that you're like, this is what I'm demoing right now?
um, right now. It's not something that came out recently. It's a few years back, but Scandinavia has a really cool electronic music scene. Danish DJ called Trentemøller, or a Swedish band called Gitch, and that is something to check out, because they produce very very well. So it's very pure sounds. It sounds great, but at the same time it's very challenging for speakers and amplifiers, because impulse response. There are no microphones, and there are no natural instruments. You basically, one guy with a computer and synthesizer can do whatever they like, and the speaker has to follow. Whereas whereas in analog recordings and natural instruments, everything has to be recorded by a microphone, so it can never be too crazy. But when we talk about electronic music, that can be really challenging audio electronics. And that's why I like to demo with that, because it really can show what the speaker can do or what it cannot do.
That's interesting because I do the same thing. There's a couple tracks that I have where I literally know it's going, like the track just sounds bad on a lot of things on purpose. Like the sounds that they produce in that kind of music. Sometimes they can purposely. There's one song where they purposely make it seem like the speaker's just blown. And it's really interesting to go. I'll go to the shows and I'll play that on these speakers because
Yeah.
I already know that it'll make make it seem like it can't handle it. So it's always good when you find one that can handle it
Yes.
and like to test that out. So that's always
I like that too.
a
I
fun
think
one.
I like that too. I think the best audio systems or speakers, they also you hear how they produced the track, what effects they used, or how they produced the music. So it doesn't sound, for example, it doesn't sound distorted, but you can hear they used an effect on the sound to make that, sound or that instrument or that voice sound distorted or has an effect on it. But you only hear it with really good systems. With lesser systems, you think that doesn't sound good. What did they do to that instrument? Whereas actually, it's a superb production, and then it's very fascinating on good speakers and good systems to kind of hear into the recording process, and you are there, and you understand the track, you understand the artist, and you understand what they've done in the studio or on their computer.
Yeah, I have this band. I was looking it up because I can never. I have just a playlist, and there's this band called 100 Gex, and there's a song called Hollywood Baby, and it literally, as soon as it starts, it just sounds like your speakers are totally blown. So like if you want, if you're watching this and you're like, I wonder if my speakers can handle that, download or pull up on Spotify or whatever 100 Gex Hollywood Baby and let us know in the comments what your speakers sound like with that song.
Yeah.
Now, what about new music? You have any new artists that you're kind of listening to right now?
There's one, he's not a new artist, but at least a new album from Jamie X from the XX. And there's a track called Still Summer. And that also starts as if it was recorded underwater, which is,
Oh wow.
it sounds weird on small speakers, like something's broken. But when you listen to it on a good pair of speakers, it sounds totally amazing. And you can even hear how he did that effect. So that's something cool.
That's amazing. Well, I love it. I can't wait to come and listen to some of this stuff on your speakers at AXPONA. It's gonna be fun to get to listen to a digital amplifier. Like I said, I only know one other company that does this, and I always like the way it sounds. So I didn't know anybody else did it. So that's exciting. And it's a beautiful looking product. Can't wait to see it at AXPONA. It's going to be a good time. Will you be there?
I will be there. Yeah, I'm looking forward.
This will be exciting.
Yeah.
We're just going to be international at this show. It's a huge show. It's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. I had a great time, learned a lot, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
See you there. And I hope we will have a good time there. We have a good sounding room, and
it's going to sound amazing. I can't wait. But for the Audio Insider podcast from AXPONA, we will see you guys next time.